So part of my thought experiment is you build a very big hollow space station, and you have lots of centrifuges inside that spin at whatever rate you set them at. Let's say that you decided to raise chickens in low Earth orbit, and any of the meat that you raised that turned out to be healthy and fine, you check it, right, could be shipped to the moon for those guys who are working there to have their chicken fritters and chicken burgers and whatever you like to make out of chicken. And you have a lot of these centrifuges that are basically heavy gauge wire welded together, wrapped in chicken wire. They're chicken coops that spin, and they have a motor on each one, and you have a potentiometer like a volume knob, so you can set the speed of each one. You're doing bulk orders for chicken for the moon. Maybe you got a couple thousand people living on the moon. You got orders to keep. You got science experiments that are going to go into that. And one of those chicken coops won't spin. You put chickens in it anyway. It's probably not going to come out as healthy. The other ones, you're going to find there's a sweet spot. Maybe it's less than 1G that they thrive more. Right? And that'll teach us about life science while supplying chicken to the guys on the moon. That kind of, whatever.
And so
works.
some of the chickens might be like really small, while some of the chickens might be bigger than we've seen.
They might all be the same size, but have different problems with circulation of their fluids. Because that's mostly what happens with us. We get weak muscles, we get weak bones, and we have problems in the distribution of fluids in our bodies. Because gravity normally pulls blood from the top of our body down, and our bodies are optimized to push that blood back up. Well, what happens in microgravity is there's nothing to push it down, so there's too much pressure pushing it up. And our eyeballs swell, we can lose our eyesight, we get a weak heart at the same time that the blood is distributing differently in our body. We have differences in our blood vessels and stuff over time. So the chickens, they may have some of these similar problems. And if you spun it up to, say, 2G, you might see that the chickens are spending too much energy just to move around and get a little bit of food, and they may lose weight. So you may see different, or they might get muscular, tough meat. Don't taste good, So you want that sweet spot where you're developing these really healthy chickens and the meat quality is good and they're safe to eat and no diseases break in because of immune problems or any of these kinds of things. So you have this whole process of testing all of these agricultural organisms that way. You grow a plant in different levels of G from zero. If it'll grow and thrive in 0G, you don't even bother testing it. You go, if it grows in microgravity, we're happy, because then we can put it in the part of the station that doesn't have to be that structurally strong. It can be resilient. There's other things to talk about with that, but that's kind of the thing. So if you were going to bring an agricultural organism up to space to test it that way, what would you choose?
Let me think about that one. An agricultural organism. I would probably honestly go with some sort of like bird or something like that. Because like I could also see like how well do they fly in, and also you got food from
hummingbirds might be really interesting.
If you get like a bird that lays eggs, you can, eat off of the eggs, or
all birds lay eggs.
Yeah.
But
like eggs that most
a hummingbird or a quail makes a very tiny egg, which might be entertaining, but not very nutritious.
Also, you can see, if the egg gets fertilized, how well do the chickens hatch out of the eggs?
Because their strength. If you're over a G,
they're not going to hatch.
They may expend too much energy just moving around inside the egg to try and crack the egg open. Or they might be more muscular.
Or if you raise a chicken in too low G, if you raise a chicken in too low G, would they become too weak because they didn't have to spend that energy?
Those are really pivotal questions that would teach us a lot about bioscience down on Earth.
Yeah.
Because we have the perfect control group on Earth. We have taken advantage of this free energy source that is equivalent to 32 feet per second of deceleration. That's why toilets work. That's why our circulation system and our bones and muscles work the way they do. It's that igloo jug would not work very well in microgravity because you could push the button. It could be full of fluid, but it might all be floating towards one side or something. And you where's my drink?
Yeah, and so what I would say to fix that is, have the button at the top. And
but it still wouldn't solve it because it doesn't matter where you put the valve. That's the basic problem that they had with fuel tanks. And there was some interesting research and even some inventions they never used, like ferrofluid. Ferrofluid's really interesting. Side note, look it up sometime on YouTube. Very cool. It's a magnetic liquid.
Ooh.
Yeah, or it's not magnetic itself. It's sensitive to magnets. So it changes its shape when you put a magnet near it.
That's cool.
It's really neat. It's called ferrofluid. Now, there's interesting things that you can do in microgravity for humans as well. One of the important things that NASA recognized a long time ago is the mental health of people living and traveling in space. Small numbers of people, it's harder to maintain a good quality of mental health than in large numbers. Large numbers of people, it tends to, the stresses tends to soften and distribute. Whereas small groups, you need high discipline, like military training for small groups of people. Like, there's a reason the Apollo astronauts were Air Force test pilots who were mentally stable even when they were the first person to ever fly some new experimental airplane. They didn't know whether it was going to explode or not. These guys were solid, like you could depend on them. And they were in experimental craft in an insanely dangerous environment where your emotional self-control was absolutely what kept you alive. Your average person on the street, probably not a good idea to sign them up to that program. But when you get millions of people in space, it gets easier. Because you can put the more stable people in charge of the door.
Yeah.
Where the other side is like, not good.
Yeah, and also, I could see how that whole thing works out because more people will find who they connect with and more people can learn from. More people, if you just got three people, they might have issues completely different from each other. Or if you've got like 20, almost everyone can find at least someone who they can connect with.
And that's why the 3 Apollo astronauts that first, went to the moon, they had to they were pre-selected and exposed to each other early and watched really carefully to see if they dealt with each other really well. So they were solid from the word go. Like the government had a lot on the line. It was very public, and it was kind of a technological punching match, penis contest between Russia and the U.S. with big consequences. So they were like, no, we're going to make sure these guys are solid.
Yeah.
Now, for mental health in a new environment, in a new city, you want some entertainment, right? Microgravity gives rise to some really fun possibilities, some of which we've seen in like Ender's Game, that movie.
I haven't seen that game.
There's a scene where they have these military games in microgravity, and they have these 2 teams, and they're floating around, and they're doing this kind of stuff. Enough said, you can look at it later.
All right.
Now, imagine a tire from a car with the kind that doesn't have an inner tube in it, and you take the rim out. Okay, so you're just dealing with that tire, the kind they have trouble finding somewhere to throw away. That shape is called a torus, but it's a special kind of torus because it's modified. A donut is a torus. But a car tire has a hollow inside edge, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of picture it in your head.
Yeah.
Imagine that the size of an Olympic-sized swimming pool and made out of clear acrylic. Got that picture?
Mm-hmm.
Now spin it pretty fast and fill it full of water. The water will stay inside the inside edge.
Mm-hmm.
Now you have a microgravity swimming pool.
That would be cool.
And you can see the people swimming around in it. And you could put paddles, little bumps, all along the inside, not so big that people would hurt themselves on them,
Mm-hmm.
but it would keep the water spinning along with the wheel. So you could sit on the edge and the water wouldn't be flowing, right? You would be going around, from your vantage point, everything else would look like it was rotating. And you would feel like you're sitting still.
That would be cool.
And you could swim forever in one direction, but you could swim across from one side to the other. And if it wasn't spinning super fast, you could actually jump, and it was shallow. You could jump out of one side, drift through the middle, and dive into the other side.
That's cool.
The visuals are nuts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that you can do, you know what a soccer ball looks like, a classic soccer ball,
Mm-hmm.
with the little patches?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you got that picture? Now imagine each one of those patches is a trampoline the size of an Olympic-style trampoline. And all the framework, all the springs and the pipes that you usually see on a trampoline are on the outside of the sphere. And all of these patches are clear vinyl with a little nylon webbing inside to give it strength. And you've got an audience outside the ball, and the soccer teams are inside the ball. And they can bounce off the sides, but they can also run around the sides by making their own centrifugal force. If they can get to running sideways along the inside, they will drift against the surface and be able to run along that trampoline surface. And with openings on opposite sides, call them whatever size you think is appropriate, right? Maybe about this big, and you give them a weighted soccer ball. And let them make up their own rules, right? Sort it out amongst themselves, what's okay and what's not okay, right? You probably want them to be wearing helmets.
Yeah, probably.
But you know how you, when you want to jump up really high when you're a little kid and you squat down in become a little bean and you jump up, right?
Yeah.
Now imagine you had somebody on your shoulders and they had somebody on their shoulders and so forth. But in microgravity, you're not feeling their weight, right?
Mm-hmm.
You would feel their mass when you shove them, right? So let's say you've got 4 guys and one guy's holding on to the rim of the goal, right? And you got a separate goalie guy that hangs around the goal to keep the ball from coming through. And he's got a guy on his shoulders, and that guy's got a guy on his shoulders. 4 guys, right? And on command, they all push at the same time with their legs and with their hands under the feet of the other guy, and they throw the guy that's on the far end of the line towards the other side.
That would be funny.
Wouldn't it be fun to watch?
Yeah.
And you could come up with points and whoever wins and who gets a violation for, running into somebody the wrong way or doing mean tricks, whatever that, they might figure out mean things to do. And then you want to have a rule. Okay, we got a rule. You can't grab the guy by the nuts as he's flying by, that kind of thing.
Don't do that.
Don't do that.
Dun, 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 dun.